Hey, Michael, welcome to the show today. As a way to get started, why don't you give us some background on yourself?
Um, Michael Humbles, I've been in sales for about 20 plus years over. Been at Bunzo 4 years, October 18th. Um, I've worked for a variety of industries from Jansen to paper products to um, LEDs to Granger. And this is my first foray into the food category. And it's been pretty interesting.
And what got you into sales? I know you have some history outside of, before getting into sales, you were in the military. And, did you have some type of epiphany back then when you were in the military that, hey, sales is what's going to be
You
for
know,
me or
in
what?
in, in the military, I had some leadership skills, and I was a distribution manager for a company called Easter Day in San Francisco, a janitorial company. And there was a company called Jansan of North America that acquired Easter Day. But prior to that, all the sales reps knew what was going on. And in one swell move, they all quit
All
and
right.
were trying to get their customers. So Jan San gave me a book and told me to go out and retain these customers at all costs. And I did. And from there, they sent me to to my first training school, a Zig Ziglar school in Oakland.
Wow.
It was
Wow.
my first foray into sales.
And did you transition pretty easily into sales? Was it easy for you at first or was it hard?
It was extremely hard. You go from a leadership role where you tell people to do something and it gets done
Right.
to a position of sales where it's more consultative. And because of my background in history, like we all do, you have this really negative image of sales. It's the
Right.
slimy guy and he's
Right.
pushing things on you. And so I had to overcome my own prejudice of what I thought a sales rep should be.
Right. And coming from a background where you were a leader and now you're an individual contributor to a team, you're in sales, you're a sales rep. How was that? I mean, how did you work through that transition? I mean, because from leadership, normally you go from an individual contributor to a leader. Now you went from a leader to an individual contributor to an organization. So, what were some of the pitfalls that you saw at first?
The freedom,
Mm,
the freedom in sales. You take the freedom as that is not. You have a limited amount of time in a day, and you need sales. You need to expend all of those. And I know there's it's probably a question that's coming up, but I had a great mentor who worked. We shared the same. We were in the warehouse, but we shared the same office space. Guy named Al Boentini, and he had been with the company for over 30 years. And we would sit and he would tell me of the traits that he saw of the successful sales reps and the traits of the reps that came and went. And, he would talk to me and I tried to imitate those traits that he taught me. He was a great person.
yeah, and being, having a mentor is very important. We'll talk a little bit more about the mentors and how important they are in your life. But what were some of the things that he had mentioned to you as a mentor? The ingredients that he found, let's say, in a salesperson that were, that made them stand out other than the ones that were unsuccessful.
Um, it was consistency, you know, doing the same things. He called it chopping wood. And I use that analogy to this day. You got to do the same things every day. You have to chop the wood, and eventually it will fall. I mean, there are tweaks, there are things that you need to reboot. But to this day, I still get up at a certain time. I still have in my calendar a call block. Now, do I get to it every day? Sometimes I don't, but I see it every day. It reminds me of that task that I need to do.
And your block time, is that for dial-ups, dialing up customers, or just, me time?
It's all customer focused, and then there's a follow up section too that I have. And also, I use something else he taught me to do was color coding of my to do list. Um, You have to do certain things, and there's certain things that you can push off because there's only a certain amount of hours a day. So you have to make sure that you're getting the must-do tasks first.
Yeah. How important is that, right?
Yeah.
So what was the color coding? Talk to me more about that. What did that do as far as you had certain colors for certain important things to do, or?
Right. Now it's evolved to where there's a color and there may be an asterisk by it. Red is something that I need to do today. There's a response I need to do today. So when I open up my computer and I'm looking at that long to-do list, it's not overwhelming because I know I have to get the red done first.
Right.
Then I can move to the green. And at the yellow can be, but then when I don't do something, I put an X1, X2. So I know that I can't move it too many times. It needs to get done eventually. And if it gets to a 2 or a 3, I'll change the color and move it down.
And the process that you use, is that something that, well, your mentor taught you, but did you bring anything to that also? Your organizational skills in the military. I mean, that had to do something with it also, right? Being able to prioritize.
Yes. There are things in the military that are hard lines that you have to do every morning. Mm-hmm. There's certain things that are expected of you, whether it's dress, responsibility. And I try to bring that into that to-do list. There are certain things that just must be done. There's no shortcuts involved, and they don't get moved on until they're actually done. It's not, okay, I sent out this email, now it's done. Did I get a response? Was there an outcome that I was expecting or not? But it has to be a conclusion to it, not just it's done and now let's move on.
And this process has been successful for you? Would you say is one of the contributors?
Yeah. And then I do podcasts. I go to the gym, and when I work out, I listen to music. But when I walk, something I'm starting to get back into, it's an hour a day. Why not listen to something that's beneficial? I like the music, but the podcast, every once in a while, even as long as I've been doing it, you hear something, a little nugget.
Right.
That people are doing now that you've never thought of. And you just take that and you make it yours.
What was something that you found productive for you during those podcasts? What were some of the nuggets you were able to pull out?
Are you familiar with the Sandler submarine? I
have heard of it. Not too familiar, though.
The Sandler submarine was something that I really embraced when I heard it. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you almost are pushing the customer away. At any point, sir, if you don't like this, please, you have the freedom to say no. But exactly know that at some point, if I don't feel that you're a good fit for Bunzo, I will say no. And they're expecting you to come in like every other sales rep and throw up all over them. Right. Hey, I got this, come buy this, and you're not. And you can feel that disarmingness when you first say that.
Yeah, it's funny you should bring that up because I was just listening to a podcast earlier myself. Just kind of I do the same thing from one account to another. It's great to be able to jump in a car, listen to the podcast, and try something different on the customer that you're about to visit. And one of the topics that came up that a lot of salespeople do not show empathy toward the customer. You had mentioned sometimes that passive aggressive approach with customers. Maybe we're not a fit. Maybe after, I get to where your gaps are, we're not going to be a fit. And I think that customers find when you are authentic, as a salesperson versus coming in there with, the happy ears and, the happy statements about who you are and what, I've got all this product to sell you. We have a lot of items that we can sell somebody. And a lot of times we assume when we walk in front and be in front of our customers, they want to buy everything that we have. That's not right. How do you get around that? What do you do to get around the whole sales pitch?
I go in with no expectations. Mm-hmm. As you said, we have X amount of products. I can go in there and ask him, but first I want to know, does he have a need? Why does he have that need? And if I'm able to tie an emotional response behind that, then I'm doing my job. It's not just, I don't want to be go on pricing because it's the fastest way to the bottom. Now, is pricing a helpful tool? Absolutely. Absolutely it is. But everybody's going in there lowering their prices. Everyone.
Right. And 90% of the time, you really don't have to lower your price. It's not always about price. You and I talked about this pre-show here about, we sell in our vertical space that we're in the packaging industry. Even though our products are horizontal, we can sell them to supermarkets, we can sell food processors, we can sell them to food service accounts, all verticals in their own space. But a lot of times people think it has to come down to a price. And, how do you personally avoid becoming a commodity? We sell commodities, but we fall into that trap. We're viewed from our customers as being a commodity. How do you avoid that?
I wish I could tell you that I avoid it all the time.
Right.
I don't, because sometimes you're moving so fast and you're hit so often that you're just like, all right, I'll lower the price. But I think it goes back to the initial call, that you're trying to tie this to some emotion. Okay, you want a 5% decrease. What does 5% do for you? What does it allow you to do? Is this something you're reporting to your boss? Does this free up some kind of other capital that you can do something else with? And I want to emphasize that this is what I'm allowing you to do. Buying from us allows you to have the other things, or the bigger picture, or the thing that brings a smile to your face. Because at some point, every customer may ask you to lower the price. But if you say no, 99% of them aren't going anywhere.
Yeah. And do you think as salespeople, we want to sell stuff and we want to solve problems? Do you see sometimes, even with our seasoned reps versus, our younger SDRs that come onto the organization, that they don't spend enough time digging deep with the customer?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do it too. I mean, we all fall traps to that because you find yourself with a limited amount of hours in a day, and sometimes you're trying to get through with it. Or sometimes it's as much as I've been in sales, there are times where I get really comfortable in the process and I forget to go through the stages, even as long as I'm doing it, because, I can just jump. And 9 times out of 10, I have to pay for that. When you skip a step or you're too confident, you get punished. And it's a reminder that the basics are there for a reason.
Yeah, exactly. And you're right. It is a constant trap that we get ourselves into. Sometimes we forget we're rushed. And a lot of times perception comes into the factor. We've talked about that a lot during some of the workshops. If any type of sales workshop you go into, or book you read, or podcast, we always talk about perception. Sometimes as salespeople, our perception is totally different than the customer's perception. You believe that?
Absolutely. We see things from the beginning. We see things differently because he's going in there. The customer, 9 times out of 10, they're in their defensive stance because they know you're trying to sell them something. And 9 times out of 10, sales reps go in there a little too aggressive because you do have a quota, you do have a number to meet, and you want to walk out of there. But as you and I know, customers will come and go. Somebody's going to take your lunch money one day.
Right.
And it's just part of the process.
Yeah, that's true. And who do you see on your sales calls typically when you go in to see a customer? And I know that you have what we call the enterprise accounts under your belt. The enterprise accounts being the bigger, more complex customers that require more time and more sales calls to get to that. But who do you normally see? Do you ever get to the C-suite level, CIOs, CFOs, CEOs?
In this industry, except for some of the larger deals, I start off with the C-suite, and I like to get kicked down.
Right.
And most of the time at this level, this is what I like to call a grunt type of sale. You're in the pit with the other grunts, and you're the guy who's getting up at 4:00 in the morning, and opening the door. And that's mostly who I deal with on a day-to-day basis. Initially, I always start off with the C-suite because it's easier to get kicked down than it is to get bumped up.
Right. And they will bounce you back down when they need it.
Oh,
But
easily. Yeah.
that's something that has. But I love the fact that you start with C-suite, and then wherever we get bounced to, that's where at least you know who the ultimate decision maker is.
And then you have his name.
Right.
I was sent to you by XYZ. And it doesn't work. Sometimes it works the other way around. But you don't know the relationship between the subordinate and the higher up. So when you get bumped up, it may not be a guy who has good reputation with the boss, and you don't want to get bumped up that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I heard an interesting stat just a couple of days ago. I was doing some research on, how many calls that you have to make before you get the first order. And what stood out in my mind, and I know this is true because, it happens in our enterprise accounts, is that today's environment, especially with the larger, more complex customers, where you have multiple decision makers and you have multiple cycles that you have to go through, how important is it to know everybody, to touch everybody in that organization?
More so today than it's ever been. I'm an old dude. I started back in the day where, you could actually get someone on the phone. You could call them up, you could bypass it, or you could go walk in the place. Because of security now, which is necessary, because of the COVID, the lingering consequences of COVID, and doors are locked now, you just can't walk in. The emails, the cell phones, it is extremely hard to get the right person. Extremely hard. So when I go on LinkedIn, Sales Navigator, I have that. I send emails or phones out to multiple people, in the hopes of getting one person.
Right.
No matter what their title is sometimes, because it's the only person I can get to. I have an app called Hunter.io, and it'll give you, if you put in the company's name, it'll give you a hint of what the company email should be. And so you can it'll give you 3 or 4 hints. And so you can try the different variations, and you usually get through, but it is just not the same as it used to be. There are too many ways for customers to, what's the right word, hide from you, I guess, or not be able to get contacted with.
And why do you think customers want to hide from us?
Goes back to my initial perception of sales reps. It's that grimy guy with the toothpick in his mouth.
Right. Yeah. They see hundreds of us all the time. They see, especially if we're selling the same commodity type item. And I always, want to ask, what is it that you do to differentiate yourself from, that other salesperson? What have you found? Was it the emails? Was it just the follow-up? Was it just being more of a consultative, salesperson when you meet that customer?
It's more of a consultative, and it's goes back into the Outlook, the calendar, the color coding. I talk to you. You're going to go in the color code 3-4 days later, because I hate the back-to-back. That's when you become annoying. But you're going to go on the Outlook calendar for a follow-up phone call, either red, green, or yellow. And you're going to get to that process. So at some point, you're going to see that I'm following up. I'm there. Hopefully, you understand that translates into when you become a customer. Or if nothing else, I want to be able to cross you out.
Right.
I just want to hear a no, so I can cross you out and move on.
Yeah. Why waste time if you're not going to, and we, a lot of times we always, as salespeople, we're so excited about getting that meeting with the customer. Meet. We got to meet that customer. You got to get that meeting going. And then we get into that meeting, and that's where a lot of us will fail, because we want to immediately put on the sales face, put on the sales voice. I have a pitch. I've got, 38 slides here to show you, and I don't really care what you're thinking. I'm going to show you what I think you need. I mean, you see that happening to a lot of newer reps, or just
all reps. Even I will sometimes fall in that trap, and that's where the process goes in. You have to have a process and stick to it. Find a process. I have a process. If I hear something on the podcast, maybe I want to throw that nugget in there. But my process is the same. I'm going to go in, I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully I can get 3 minimum, hopefully 3 questions, follow-up questions off of my initial question, so that I'm able to dig deeper and not just get your superficial answer that you're giving me to get me out of your door.
Right. To
Yeah,
make the meeting go a lot quicker, right? They just say
yeah,
no and you're gone. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
What have you found more useful in your process? Is it the emails? Is it doing any video messaging? Is it, dropping things off at the office, demos? What do you feel has worked
It,
really good
it's
for you?
it's definitely emails. That's my number one reach. People don't answer the phone anymore. If you have a cell phone, a text is really great. And the video message is something that I've heard over and over on numerous podcasts, and I'm still not doing. Uh, but as younger people become buyers and decision makers, that needs to be incorporated in my day-to-day reach. And I suspect that I will have a great ratio of return from that. And it's something that I really need to do. At first, I was really pissed off with customers texting me. This is not professional, but it's the way business is done now. That was
Exactly.
just my little thing.
Right.
So now I text with customers
Right.
and I get responses.
There you go. See, and we have to be, as salespeople, we have to be flexible. And what happened prior to COVID, the pandemic, has totally changed after the pandemic. I mean, the way people think and the new actors that are coming in there, the new procurement people that you have to talk to, and a lot of it, the younger generation is coming in, and you have to know how to deal with them because a lot of them may not have the time or want to see you in person. As we grew up in this industry, right? They're different. But you have to be able to adapt to that.
Right. I'm still an old fashioned. I want to see you. I want to shake your hand. People who were raised with cell phones in their hand have a different perspective. And as a sales rep, I think I was caught in the trap of this is the way it's done. This is the way it's done. And revisiting these podcasts have shown me that the world is changing, and don't want to be a dinosaur and get wiped out.
Yeah,
Need to adapt.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. As an individual contributor, when you have a need for your sales leader, your sales manager, your sales director, what is it you usually go to them for?
Everything. This industry is constantly changing. I try not to wear them out, you know, but this Bunzo is a huge ship, and there's a lot of moving parts. It doesn't turn easily, and there are times that you need an email. You need a follow-up to get the process moving a little bit faster. People respond to management more than they respond to me sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
And you touched earlier on mentors, and that's important to me because of the fact that I think I always say in a podcast that I usually have 2 or 3 or 4, even 5 mentors at one time, depending on where I'm at in my situation. But what do you think is a good ingredient that you look for in a mentor?
At first it was someone who was just successful in the industry that I was in. I would attach myself to another sales rep. But then I found that some of the most successful sales reps sometimes weren't doing things according to the way I would like them done. They didn't treat their customers according to the way I would like to get things done. And more importantly, coming from inside, they weren't treating the inside staff the way I like to see the inside staff treated. So right now, I think my newest mentors are people on podcasts or certain sales guides. I mean, but you have to be careful because they're trying to sell a product. These guys on the podcast are trying to sell a book. They're trying to sell it, and everyone has to eat.
Right.
If I'm getting knowledge from you, I have no problem with maybe reciprocating. But sometimes people will say things that are just not right. But the podcast, I think, and the Mark, what's his last name? Mark Weisenach, I follow. There's a couple other guys, and I have, may not follow, but I will spend $30 to get an ebook from them because I'm taking nuggets from them, and it's only fair.
Right. And that's where a lot of our knowledge comes today. It's outside. A lot of times we don't have time to read. I know I don't have a lot of time to read, so I rather listen to a podcast or get the information, the content, what's the content, what are you talking about, and how is it going to be useful to
There's
me,
no
right?
excuse. We're all stuck in our cars for an amount of time. You can listen to a podcast.
Yeah, especially out in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah. You have a lot of time.
Yeah. So early in your career, let's talk about early in your career. You had a lot of energy as a salesperson, right? The energy was there, but you may not have had the experience. Now, looking down the road here, what do you wish you had possibly when you had all that energy? Maybe what on the experience side would, have brought you to that next level?
Patience. And when I was younger in the military, I used to play a lot of dominoes. And there was a saying, all money ain't good money. When you play dominoes, I would chase $15. I would chase people who didn't need to be chased because every sale was important. And it's not. It's the quality of the sales and then the dollars. Because you chase people around, you follow up with a guy for a small order, then you never hear from them again. The time I wasted chasing the wrong people. If I had to do it all over again, but I had that energy and I wanted to, everyone, and my mentors told me, you have to move on. You need to go. A no gets you to the next customer, but I did not want to hear that. Right. Every customer that's money. Why give it up? And that was like the biggest mistake. I wasted a lot of time on kissing a lot of frogs.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had to be more selective. When a deal stalls for you, why does it stall? What happens with that customer? What makes it?
Well, I hate to say this because I'm sure Imo and Tom may watch this, but 9 times out of 10 it's me. I didn't do the background check well enough. I didn't see if they had a sense of urgency, or if they were ready to move. Sometimes I skipped that process. I didn't feel comfortable or didn't think I needed to ask that question of when do you think you may want to move this? Do you have foresee anything that may stall this? Because it's done. I don't need to ask those questions. And so 9 times out of 10 it's me. And then a lot of times, for some reason, a lot of people have a hard time saying no in person.
Right.
They just don't want that confrontation.
Yeah, depending on the persona of that buyer, that customer, right? They don't want to say no to you at first or ever, right? They don't. When you're a big process person like you are, that tends to be something that's always in your mind. And that's what I think about you all the time, is how much, process means to you. And if you skip a process, exactly, like you just said, if the deal stalls, it's typically because you forgot something in the process or you just didn't use it that day. Processes are important, just as more, if anything, a check and balance. And
you were saying earlier that with young versus the young rep, if I could give any advice to a young rep, follow your process and stick with it. I don't care. Boring is good. Like Mr. Boentini used to say back in the day, chop the wood. Keep chopping it.
Right. And what are some other ingredients that you think, that make a very successful salesperson, in your opinion?
One that I've been struggling with lately is managing your personal stress, your stress. This is a stressful job.
Right.
I think we all have that inner voice where, you just want to strangle somebody some days. I have a buddy who's in sales, and he and I have been friends for like 20 years. And he showed me a statistic. I think sales reps our life expectancy is like 4 years shorter than other industries. And it's all based off of stress. And I have a hard time managing the stress. The stress level is something that everyone needs to manage some kind of way.
Right. And in sales, we know, right? We have to love rejection. We have to love being put on the back burner, right?
I take exception with that sometimes. I don't think you have to learn to like rejection. I think rejection will always hurt.
Right.
We're humans. I always want people to like me. I want to ingratiate. Rejection will always hurt. I think it comes back to how do you manage that hurt?
Right.
There's some customers where I'm like, I'm glad I didn't have to deal with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And we all have to deal with that. Like you said, the stress, if you let the stress catch up with you, it will eventually, and it will wear you down as a salesperson.
Oh, I've seen sales reps who just get turtle. They shrink in. The stress just becomes overwhelming. They open their email, they just can't do it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael, great conversation today. How do people, if they want to connect or follow you, how do they get hold of you?
Just follow me on LinkedIn. It's just my name. Just coming over to LinkedIn or email me, michael.humbles@bunzelusa.com.